All right, and we are recording, which is great. Okay, excellent. So we'll give everybody a few seconds here to join in, and then we'll get going. And where again are you, Beverly?
I'm located in Kansas City.
Okay, I'm not going to hold that against you.
Oh no.
All
Where are
right.
you
Yeah,
from?
I'm in North Carolina. I'm from Massachusetts, so
Okay, okay.
now you know why. Yeah. Um, all right. Well, we had a great chat with Sackett earlier today on Instagram, and then our Sean O'Connor, who heads up sales and does product development and merchandising for our upholstery offering, took us through some of the new introductions as part of special order upholstery. So we were very excited about that. And I know, we do a lot of things with you all.
Yes.
Let's see. Oops. Hold on one second here.
Sure.
Let's see. All right. Sorry. I was sharing my screen, apparently sharing the wrong thing. So I think everybody should be seeing. Are you seeing the virtual market website, Beverly?
I am.
Okay, great. That's what everybody should be seeing. Okay. So as folks pop in, I do just want to kind of point out, first of all, my name is Neil McKenzie. I head up marketing here at Universal, here with Beverly McGauley. From Moore & Giles. We do a lot of work with the team at Moore & Giles, and really pleased about kind of the introduction of over 50 leathers from Moore & Giles as part of our new special order upholstery offering. I did just want to share, we are recording this session, and Beverly is going to go over all the specifics as it relates to getting your CEU credit, so I'll let her address that. You will see at the bottom of the screen, we do have an opportunity for you to chat with Beverly and I. You can also ask any questions. Beverly may save some of those questions towards the end. So we'll just kind of keep the flow going. I did just want to point out this website, which is our virtual market website, does have a lot of content available, including all the new things that we touched on for special order upholstery. And then you can go in and check out our getaway collection with Coastal Living, check out our new modern offerings for this spring, and then all of the educational events, and this is number 10, will be located here. Everything that we did on Friday, of which there were 7, a little bit later in about an hour or so, you'll be able to go in here and rewatch anything if you missed anything. We'll also be sending out an email to everyone with links to catch up on anything that they missed. So as I mentioned, Beverly McGauley, who heads up training for Moore & Giles, and we, again, have a great partnership with the team at Moore & Giles. Really pleased to include them in our virtual market. And typically we'd be doing this in our learning center, but instead we're bringing it to your house. So some unforeseen times, but we're making the most of it. So we hope you enjoy this session with Beverly. And Beverly, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share yours, okay, and then we can kind of get into the presentation.
Great. All right. Everyone, bear with me for a moment while I get this figured out here.
All right. And as you share your screen, Beverly, I'll also add, obviously, Beverly is at home, taking advantage of the bandwidth that she has available to her. So some things may not flow as fast as normal. We'll just apologize in advance for any little technical glitches that we may encounter. So
that is accurate. Okay, let's see, Neil, I'm trying to hide you.
You can just click on the little minimize button. Okay. It's the smallest little one there.
I'll try to get you down there. All right.
And then go ahead and launch. And again, for folks that are joining, Beverly will address the CEU credit and how to get that credit. And then we are recording this as we have all of our educational pieces as part of this virtual market presentation. So Beverly, I will let you go ahead and take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Neil. Yes, so I am going to be helping you understand uh, leather and its character through the CEU. Um, I will let you all know that there is a Q&A session at the end of the CEU. And what I find when giving this educational session is that most of the questions people have on the tips of their tongues, I'm just about to tackle in the next slide or two. So feel free to jot down your questions during this session and then maybe save them for the end, unless there's just some, burning, life-changing question you have, then by all means feel free to include that in the chat or in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Okay, let's see here. So as I mentioned earlier, this CEU is called What's Your Type? A Designer's Guide to Specifying Leather. What I find often is that people have a perception of leather. Often it comes from whatever they've experienced in their car, which is too bad because that's just really not great leather, I have to admit. Or maybe what they've experienced in their home. There are so many different characteristics in the type of leather that is available to you that it's important to understand that versus just opening a box of samples and selecting for color, for instance. This educational session will help you with that. The CEU is registered with the IDCEC. If you have an IDCEC number, well, I would just recommend that you can self-report. You will get a certificate of completion after this CEU from Warren Giles, and you can take that information and self-report with IDCEC. If you have trouble with that, there should be an email on the certificates, and you can certainly reach out and we can help you with it. It's very easy. So let's dive in. So the infographic I'm about to show is from a Twitter poll from 2018, where over 7,500 people were polled just to ask this question: what's the best grade of leather? With these answers, just take a moment to consider maybe what your perception is, what your answer is, and don't worry, I'm not going to ask you. So 41% of the people answered genuine leather is the best grade of leather. 24% followed up with full grain, and a close third was top grain leather at 23%. Finally, with 12% of the answers saying bonded leather. So the interesting thing here, and we'll dive into these different types of leather and what they all mean, right? But genuine leather is technically, it's usually a finished split leather, and you're going to know exactly what I mean by that by the end of this session. But it's really kind of the worst type of leather. I mean, bonded is the worst, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but genuine is the next worst type of leather. Yeah, I'll save the details for a little bit on there. Full grain is the answer. Full grain leather is the very best type, but technically, and this is the tricky part, full grain is a top grain leather. So isn't that confusing? You're probably more confused now than you were before. But we will dive into that and explain it all so that it will be so much more clear here in the following slides. Just a few fun facts about leather, because it does touch our lives in so many different ways. The first leather tennis shoe was introduced by Adidas in the late 60s. The footwear industry is actually still the largest consumer of leather in the world. And when you think about how tiny shoes are, you have to understand that there are so many pair out there. It accounts for approximately 55% of all leather produced. Upholstery only makes up 10%, and then automotive makes up 8 to 12% of the overall leather market. This is an interesting fact. I did not realize until I started working for Moore & Giles, and I had 7 years of leather experience prior to that, that the Roman army employed its own tanneries to outfit the troops. So leather has literally protected lives. It's also the third wedding anniversary gift. And something you might be aware of is that leather is used on all the NFL footballs dating back to the first Super Bowl. I will insert here that I'm from Kansas City, and I'm so proud that we won the Super Bowl this past year. It was very, very exciting time for us here in Kansas City.
All right, Bev.
I know. Easy, Neil. But did you know that there are 120 footballs used in each Super Bowl? I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so in this first lesson, we're going to talk about the base part of making leather. So if you think about the making of leather like a recipe, okay, the tanning process is that foundation, okay? The tanning process, as referred to in reference of a recipe, would be like a pound cake versus, say, an angel food cake, right? They're both cake, but they're made a little differently. So that foundation is a very important piece of it. Now, the icing on the cake refers to the finish on the leather, and we'll cover that later. And the icing bit is probably what everyone is most drawn to and familiar with and aware of. However, you would not get there without this piece. It's a very important piece. So if we look at what is leather, leather is a hide or skin, okay, basically that's been tanned to stop the rotting process, okay? So taking a hide or skin from an animal, whether it be a cow, a bull, a sheep, etc., and tanning it. Then tanning is the process where the raw hides and skins are converted into leather. So until it's been tanned, it isn't technically leather. And I will mention here, there are there's a lot of terminology being thrown around these days regarding vegan leather, vegan leather is probably the most commonly used term that I've heard in the last, 6 months, but it's impossible to be leather unless it is a hide or skin that's been tanned. So just, keep that in mind, and I'm certainly interested in having that discussion with anyone toward the end as far as, what is vegan leather and how can we compare that with actual leather. So back to this slide, until leather has been tanned, it is still just an animal hide or skin. So the tanning process, there are 4 main stages when a hide of leather enters the tanning process. And this is a really great time to remind you that leather is a byproduct. So often, the story is part of the meat industry. I've given this presentation and many other leather presentations for years, and often the question is, do we harm animals for their hides? And the answer is no. The leather industry is a separate industry. The meat industry is connected to the raising of the animal and the slaughtering of the animal for meat. If we all quit eating meat tomorrow, there would be no leather to deal with. The leather industry takes the waste product from meat and it diverts it from the landfill and tans the hides, finishes the hides into a very versatile, durable, functional, beautiful product. So if you think about all the products that are out there that we celebrate, taking something from the landfill, some piece of trash from the ocean or whatever, and then making a usable product out of it, that's what leather is. It's really one of the originals. the original form of recycling, if you will. So keep that in mind. It really is something that can be celebrated without the guilt. And I think people are happy to hear that. So back to this slide, the 4 stages of leather production. The beam house is where the hide enters the tannery. This is where they, soak, wash, maybe they take the hair off, maybe they don't, but this is where that stage would happen. In the tan yard, that's where they pickle and decide, okay, which type of tanning are we going to use? Here in this flow chart, they're showing chrome tanning or vegetable tanning. We'll go over each of these types and then some here in a moment. But this is where the tanning process, the first part of it takes place. Then the next stage is retan, color, fat liquor. This is kind of where we add, we zhuzh it, let's just say that. We add some fat liquors, we might retan it. This is where we dry the hides. And really, depending on how you dry the hides, you might get a different look. And we can talk about that in a moment as well. Then the finishing stage is the final stage where we really kind of manipulate that recipe to be perfect for that particular unique product. So this is where any embossing might take place, or hand rubbing of waxes and oils, or buffing, those final little stages, the icing on the cake, the last little bit. So this next stage, or this next slide, is going to be a video, so just sit back and enjoy. This has taken place in one of our tanneries in Italy, and it is a really kind of a fast look at all of the different stages that I just spoke of.
The fine line between contrived and genuine when you're in these businesses, and I think this is very genuine. I think that creates that 10 to 15% extra in our leathers that make them really unique.
Shoot, sorry, I'm so sorry. Here, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna try to get you there.
Yeah, it's the bandwidth. You're not alone.
Here, let's try it again. Here we go. I think we were here. I'm sorry if it goes, if we repeat a little bit here. Sorry.
And everybody, what I was gonna say too?
Okay, so I'm going to just touch on a few things from that video quickly. Um, you noticed the different, hopefully, if you could see the video, the film, you noticed the drying process. And I touched on that earlier as far as how you dry a leather can make a difference. So if you've ever noticed a leather that is smooth on the front, and then on the back, it looks like there's a texture almost that makes you question, is this leather or is it fabric? I don't know what this is. That is the result of a vacuum drying method. So whenever a hide has been vacuum dried, it's going to be smooth on the front, and it'll have that little texture on the back, and it's just from the table that it sits on. It suctions the moisture out of the hide from underneath, so that's how it gets that texture from the actual table. When you hang or air dry a hide, it's going to have more texture. And then if you noticed those big wooden barrels, those are called milling drums, and they're fascinating. It's a very old world technique that is still used today, that they tumble the hides in a way that makes it softer. It opens the grain a little bit, but that makes that grain larger and more pebbled in a natural sense. It is not embossed to look like that. It becomes that way from the milling process. So there, again, we go back to that recipe with leather. There's so many different things that you can do to a leather to make it unique and different. So it's part of the beauty, I think. So if we look at the different tanning methods, there are several options when it comes to tanning. Each will impart unique qualities into the final product, but this chart will detail kind of the history and the three main types of tanning. Vegetable tanning was the first form of tanning. After doing some deep dives into research, we know that leather dates back to the 11th century in a vegetable tanning process. The production time can take as long as 2 months. It's a lengthier process. It's something where we've taken something from nature. So you take tree barks and plant roots and leaves and things like that from nature, and you create a bath for the leather. Basically, the leather soaks in those natural products, those organic products. And in a vegetable tanning method, it's a lengthy pit method where they soak in pits and kind of move down the line with different percentages of the tannage to very rich firm hand leather. So if you think of, belts, okay, so something that's a little more firm, a little harder, more difficult perhaps to upholster a tightly curved chair in a purely vegetable tanned leather. But gorgeous. And then mineral tanning is the most widely used form of tanning. It's what we're all familiar with. This is where we take, the tanneries take a chemical. It takes a bath in a chemical. So typically chromium sulfate is the product that is usually used in mineral tanning. 80 to 90% of the leather produced globally is minerally tanned. It's been around since the 19th century. The nice thing about this way to tan leather is that it's fast. It came along, it was so much faster, and you could achieve so many more colors and textures, and it was just a much more versatile way to tan leather. And that's when, all our furniture companies really benefited from using minerally tanned leather. And then the most recent form of tanning that we are very proud to provide at Moore & Giles is olive leaf tanning. So olive tanning was developed in 2006. And it's a really groundbreaking, inspiring story where the byproduct from the olive industry, which are the fallen leaves from the olive trees, they were typically burned into the atmosphere, and a couple of chemists saw that process, didn't like what that was doing to the environment, and said, surely we can find something we can do with these leaves. So they created a new way to tan leather. So they make a bath or a syrup, if you will, out of these fallen olive leaves, using a byproduct to tan a byproduct to create this amazingly organically tanned product. The other really great thing about olive tanning is that you can still achieve a broad spectrum of colors and textures and character, so much more than you could with vegetable tanning. Olive tanning is not considered vegetable tanning because you're using a byproduct rather than taking something from nature. The other nice thing is that you don't have to use new equipment. You can use the same equipment at the tannery that they've been using for years to minerally tan products. So really great win-win for the environment. Olive tanning has led to the first Declare label products in the world. And again, we hold those with Moore & Giles, and proud to say so. It's a pretty great product and process. So we've talked about tanning, so that's kind of the base. Now we're going to go into the grain. So often we hear people are just married to the grain that they saw in their sample, this either smooth or really big pebbled grain. So it's important to understand that, the look of the grain, but also the terminology when it comes to leather. So we're talking about, have you heard of the term top grain leather, which we talked about earlier? You've heard full grain, you've heard all of these different terms that can be really confusing when it comes to, leather and, what you're getting, what you're asking for. So that's what we're going to cover now. So really, what is top grain? So if you look at this slide, it's showing you kind of the section view of a piece of leather. So when leather is received into the tannery, it's really very thick. So it's split. The thickness is sheared off. So you can see that blade in the center. We'll see another slide that shows you a more detailed image of this process. But top grain leathers are referring to the top layer, okay? There are a lot of different products that can come out of that top layer. Just because something is top grain, it doesn't mean that it's full grain. Okay, so we'll kind of keep chipping away at this until it's easy to understand. But top grain strictly refers to the location of the hide where the leather is produced. The split is the lower portion. So that's often suede, okay? So that's where your suede comes from. Or other products heavily worked on to make it look like leather. That's where genuine leather often comes from, is that lower portion. So we'll take what would typically be a suede and apply so much pigment to it to make it look like leather that it's just not great leather, right? But when you refer to the split as suede, as I mean, we all love suede. It's very beautiful and definitely has its own use and purpose. Here's another image of that machine. So if you look at, you know, nubuck and how it's different from suede, for instance. If you look at the hide, again, you see in the image, the cowhide is on the machine. The blade is cutting down the middle. The upper portion, the top grain portion, becomes leather. It becomes nubuck as well, okay? So a nubuck, it looks like a suede. You can track your hand on that nap. It's gorgeous. But it does come from that top layer. So it's also larger. So if a hide is typically on average 50 to 55 square feet, for instance, the nubuck is going to be that big. It's going to be a huge hide. Absolutely gorgeous if you're upholstering a sofa or something large. The bottom portion becomes the suede. So if you've noticed, so suede is typically very consistent in texture, okay? Whereas nubuck isn't necessarily, because you still can pick up the natural variation of the hide, the natural texture variation. So if you look at what is the difference between full grain and corrected grain. So full grain leathers they do come from the top grain leather. That is the uppermost layer of epidermis. That's when you have a hide from an animal, right, that has lived its life, that is so free of characteristics like bite marks and scars that it doesn't have to be corrected. So make no mistake, every hide comes from an animal. Every hide will have some scars, maybe some bite marks, some fat wrinkles, evidence of neck wrinkles, things like that, because they're animal hides. It's important to remember that. But full grain leathers are the cleanest, the most clean of those types of hides, okay? So that they can be used as is. Those are typically the best when they've been unaltered, all right? The finest leather goods are made from full grain leather. Most of the leathers that Moore & Giles carries are full grain leathers. Now, corrected grain is still a top grain, okay? It's still a top grain leather. However, it has more of those scars. It has more of those characteristics that are, so many that it wouldn't work as a full grain leather. We still want to make use of those hides, right? We don't want to throw those in the landfill. So those hides have been corrected. They've been sanded or buffed on the surface to remove the imperfections. And then often a little more pigment is applied to those hides, and then a embossing to give the appearance of uniform color and consistency. So that's something that you'll notice between full grain and corrected grain hides often, is that a corrected grain hide, the upholstery shop will probably love it because it will be very consistent in texture. The full grain hides will have more variation in texture. Another great thing to mention here is sampling. When you receive a sample of leather, if you are super excited about the texture, it's very important here to note that, ask your representative or your salesperson, what type of leather is this? And can I expect this texture throughout the hide? Just so that you understand what you're getting. With a full grain leather, the texture might be very smooth and cut from the center of the hide, or it might have a lot of texture. Maybe it was cut from the edge of the hide. It doesn't mean that you'll have that identical texture throughout the entire hide. Part of the beauty of a full grain leather is that variation. There's another way to further dive into this. So from a top grain, the top grain section of a hide of leather, you get full grain. And now we're get into what we're touching is okay. We'll get into these and greater. With a full grain, you can have aniline, or finishes. Most of the leather products that are available to you with the Universal Furniture line are aniline plus. But I think you do also have a couple of semi-aniline products new. And then under corrected grain, you have pigmented leathers, and nubuck is considered corrected because it's been buffed. Okay, so pigmented just means there is more pigment in the dye. And we'll cover that here a little bit more. So lesson 3, as we move into the third portion of this lesson, we're going to talk about the icing on the cake, okay? This is the part that gets everyone excited. This is the part that people connect to the most, I think, you know? But again, you have to understand some of these other pieces and the part they play in the finished product. So this is a shorter video regarding the finishes.
What are the different types of leather? Leather can be divided into 2 groups, top grain and split leather. So what's the difference? Before leather is tanned, it is split down the middle to reduce thickness. The lower level, the split, is often used to make suede. Whereas the upper level of the hide, the top grain, is where we get both full grain and corrected grain leathers. The overwhelming majority of Moore & Giles hides are top grain. So what does full grain mean? Full grain leather refers to hide that has never been sanded or buffed to change the natural features of the hide. Meanwhile, corrected grain simply means that sanding or buffing has been used to change the grain, perhaps make it more smooth or remove natural markings. Full grain and corrected grain leathers fall into 5 categories. Pure aniline maintains the leather's most natural look and will patina quicker than other leathers. Semi-aniline leathers show some natural markings, but overall has a uniform color and protective coating, making it easy to clean. Aniline Plus has no protective coating. Instead, a layer of waxes or oils are applied, allowing patina and natural markings to be seen. Pigmented leather has a uniform color and protective coating added, which makes it more scratch resistant and very easy to clean. Nubuck, suede, has a soft, natural feel with no protective coating added. For more on types of leather, how it's made, and what leather is right for me, visit mooreandgiles.com. What are the different types?
There we go. Okay, so we're gonna, again, we'll go over some of those different types of leather a little bit more here in just a moment. But something else that I mentioned earlier are the hide markings. This image indicates some of the different types of hide markings that you might see on a leather hide. Now, typically in an upholstery shop, they're working around most of these or cutting around them. But occasionally you'll have a small scar or insect bite, which looks like a little dot, really. Typically, you're not going to see brand marks cut into your furniture unless you're looking for that, and they aren't on every hide. A lot of our hides come from Europe where there aren't necessarily brand marks included. You might have scars from the animal scratching itself on barbed wire if that exists where they lived their life. You can also see scars from other things. Maybe another animal bit it. Maybe it wasn't happy with it or something. You see neck wrinkles are common with bull hides especially, but you also might see some fat wrinkles, which really, those aren't necessarily raised or an issue. Those are typically what you want to highlight. You'll see variation in color there, and they're absolutely gorgeous. So grain variation is probably the #1 thing that you are guaranteed to get on every hide. And again, if it's corrected and pigmented, you might not see a lot of grain variation, but otherwise you can expect to see some of these on hide, after all. We're going to different here to help you understand the shit. So if we look at, going from left to right, if we look at kind of the pure aniline leather under the natural aesthetic, okay, the pure aniline leather is going to be the most naked. It has very little added to it other than being tanned and dyed. And when we do dye leather, we dye it with aniline dyes, which are transparent dyes, almost like a stain, okay? Or if you're an artist, think watercolor versus oil, okay? But if you use the stain on a pure aniline product, it might have just a very, very little applied to it. And then you look at Aniline Plus, and as mentioned in the video, a little bit more has been done to it. Still, both products are natural leathers. They will patina. You will see into the color. You'll see highs and lows. You'll see the natural characteristics. It will get better with age. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous product. But with Aniline Plus, you have a little bit more. So maybe there's waxes or oils. Maybe it's been, maybe it doesn't have waxes or oils, but there's just a little bit of a clear coat or a powder. Maybe it's tumbled with powdered wax to give it a little bit of a different aesthetic. But there's just something added to that recipe to make it Aniline Plus. Many, many leathers fall within that category. Many different looks, okay? Then if you go to another stage is semi-aniline. Those are typically products that have a full grain leather. You have the dyes, just like in the prior two stages, but then something else is added. A little bit of pigment, okay? A fine mist of pigment typically added to semi-aniline to give it a consistent color. So this would be something you would want, say patina is not your thing. You don't necessarily want patina. You want a burst of color. For some reason, patina might concern you and you prefer a semi-aniline product. There are some gorgeous semi-aniline products out there, and that would be, it's maybe less natural looking, but still will be a beautiful product for many years. And then you go to pigmented, where it's going to have the most finish, okay? So you've got your, that yellow block is your crust of leather that you start with once it's been tanned and dyed initially all the way through. And then from there you can see with each stage you have a little bit more and a little bit less transparency. So that pigment is all the way coated. This is another example of different types of, another way to look at it, I guess, of the different levels of finish. So if you think of a wood, that bare wood, totally unfinished, is crust. So people typically don't sell the crust leather because it just has absolutely nothing done to it at all. That bare wood with just a little light bit of clear added to it to soak in, it would be like a pure aniline leather. The semi-transparent stain would be like an Aniline Plus. So you can still see all of those natural characteristics. You can see into the wood and see that variation, but it just is a little bit more. And then the semi-solid would be semi-aniline. So it's covered most things, but you can still, really, quite frankly, between the semi-aniline and the pigmented, you're going to tell a difference usually in the hand of the leather. You're going to see a difference in the texture of the grain. Typically, Semi-aniline just has less, pigment. It has just enough typically. And then you have your pigmented leather, which would be like a solid color. And finally, this chart is one that I like. It really helps you understand the different characteristics and the features, and then it even touches on, the care of leather, which really often, I hear people say often, they're so concerned about the maintenance of leather. So I mean, it really isn't. Quite frankly, leather is going one of the easiest things with this. Your home off, space. It's full, because it doesn't have so much added to it. Typically, if you spill something on leather, in the beginning, you might panic. Don't. It's okay. Take a breath. Within a couple of days, that spill will work its way through the fibers, mellow out, and often it really is gone. If it isn't gone, it kind of dissipates throughout the hide and becomes much more, much less noticeable, and just part of the patina. Semi-aniline or pigmented leathers can be wiped off pretty quickly, pretty easily. So it's a very durable, functional product. And then we're going to show a few of the projects where we've utilized our products or leather in various finishes. So you can see the ottomans here are an aniline plus leather. This chair, the back of the chair slide is a really great example of fat wrinkles. So you can see those kind of lines, those darker lines, those are fat wrinkles. You can see how you could see into the color here. Again, this is an aniline plus leather. You can see highs and lows. You see that variation. It's gorgeous. Typically with a natural leather, its best day is coming way down the road. The first day you receive that piece of furniture is its worst day, and it's just going to get better with time and use and age. This is a great example of a semi-aniline leather. Now this car, is, most of our cars have leather, but it is not semi-aniline leather. There's actually very little true leather in a car. There might be a panel or two, and it's heavily pigmented, heavily corrected. Another example of a semi-aniline leather. So you can see here, it's more of a solid color. Private aviation is a huge market for semi-aniline and pigmented leathers. So that's another example there. This is a great picture of a nubuck. So you can see the large pieces there. You wouldn't have been able to probably get that center cushion out of a suede hide without a seam. So another good reason to use nubuck. It's a little thicker. It just has a wonderful hand. Suede is also absolutely gorgeous, and really quite easy to care for. Something that we don't have an image of is the hair on hide. So if you leave the fur on the hide, people often will use those cow hides as rugs or upholstery. The easiest thing I've ever had, personally, in my collection of leather items in my home is the cowhide products. It's really easy to care for and very functional. Another image of a few different finish types. The brown there is a pure aniline. Doesn't really have anything added to it. And we have the magenta is an aniline plus, I believe, and then the nubuck there at the bottom. So in the very beginning, I talked about the bonded leather that was in that questionnaire. So this just kind of talks about some of the other options that are out there. And that picture is annoying, but we've probably seen that type of image, and if you've experienced that in your life, you might not like leather at all. But bonded leather is similar to particle board. If you think about it that way, then you understand. It's basically made of ground up leather pieces that are produced into a slurry, or, and dried in sheets. It's a byproduct of leather waste, which, we'd never like to see anything go into the landfill. But it has its use, and it's probably not something that you cover your furniture appliance. Recycled leather, to describe leather, all leather by nature, leather is a great recycling story, okay? So when someone says recycled leather, sometimes what they're referring to is leather that has been bonded, or artificial leather, just like the whole vegan leather. It's really not leather that they're talking about. So I would encourage you to ask questions. And if you don't like the answer, or you're not confident, then maybe steer away from it. And finally, the bi-cast or PU leather. It's also known as coated split leather. So that's where that split, so that suede, that bottom portion, which isn't meant to be used as leather, they're finished with a polyurethane coating to mimic the look of full grain leathers. That is often what is in our cars. That is often what genuine leather is, and that is what you're seeing in this picture to the left. So this last bit is really frequently asked questions, and rather than going through those, I'd like to, or before I do, if you want me to go through them, I can, but I would like to know if anyone out there, has some questions. I'm happy to answer.
Beverly, this is Neil. I think we can make the presentation available. We are recording this, so we'll send this out. In terms of all the videos too, we can include links to the respective videos that were shared, Beverly, just so people kind of take it in. In some cases, it may have been choppy depending on where one was,
Okay.
but we can be able to do that. Beverly, one question: is bonded leather the same as blended leather?
Blended leather. That's an excellent question. I am not familiar with, name would make me think that that's probably something similar. I can't imagine. I mean, blended to me would mean they've mixed something together with pieces, I don't know. The imagery that comes to mind is the same, yeah.
And then a question came up: are products used for leather, rugs, squares, etc.? I mean, I guess that's really just a personal preference. We definitely use some in our showroom. I know, just at a fair assessment.
Right. Yeah, typically, okay, so if we're talking the hair on hide, the patchwork rugs?
That's where I was going.
Like that type, or?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yes, so those are just, I would guess that those are just the cut pieces from various colors of haired hide rugs, and they've been sewn together, yeah.
Yep. A few other questions coming in. Are any of your leathers of U.S. origin? Does any of the tanning processes take place in the United States?
Okay. We do have the majority of our tanneries are European. However, we do have a very small handful of opportunities here in the United States, yes, that we gather from. Mm-hmm.
And most of the leathers, I know within Universal, they are originating in Italy. Just yes. That's where they're being executed. Let's see, some other questions. What's the difference of some leathers where the color seems to just be a top coat versus the color running all the way through the leather?
Excellent question. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so oftentimes what you will find with a hide of leather is that it goes through many different manufacturing processes and locations. So when you are seeing a hide that is a completely different color on the top than it is underneath, typically what's happened there is that the hides have been tanned and dyed to a limited number of colors, and then shipped someone who will fit hide order, say in a blue or okay, underneath is gray or white, something very, very different. Probably the person that finished that leather didn't have a crust that was a blue color, so they used it.
Hey, Beverly.
Yeah.
Hey, Beverly, can you start again? You kind of cut out there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Let me see if I can get to a better position here, maybe. Yes, so oftentimes leather suppliers will have a limited number of crust colors, as opposed to, for instance, what we do with Moore and Giles, which is every product is dyed initially to match the end color of the product. Now, there might be some variation if there's waxes or oils or something like that in the surface, and it's really just that wax or oil that is the difference. But if you're talking about a hide that, maybe is blue, but underneath is white or something, probably what's happened there is the supplier did not use the same method of tanning and finishing, and they've dyed the initial hide one color and then just taken, pulled whatever color hide to then finish in a different color. And that's something that a lot of other competitors out there do, and it makes for less inventory, but not the best product.
Okay. Some other questions that are coming in. What is the bluing process in tanning, and is this done on all hides? What is the tanning process for hair on hide?
Okay. The bluing is another way to talk about the wet blue or the mineral tanning stage. Okay, so the chrome tanning stage. When it goes through, and you might have noticed if your video worked, that first longer video, in the chrome tanning or mineral tanning process, all of the hides come out with kind of a bluish tone to them, and that's why it's called bluing. That's that tanning process. Let me see, what was the other part of the question? Oh, the hair on hide is the same. I mean, it's chrome tanned or mineral tanned for the hair on hide.
Okay. And then this is a question. Can you talk about the backing on leather products that allows the piece to breathe? And do you see that same backing on bonded or PU bi-cast leathers?
Okay, so there is no backing on a true leather hide. The leather by nature breathes. So often we hear people say, oh, I don't want leather because, it's cold in the winter, or hot in the summer. And again, that's someone who's typically dealt with their car seat, a true natural leather, a good leather will be neutral. Actually, it doesn't, get hot or cold. It becomes more friendly, and it is, it's actually, no backing necessary. It breathes and is very comfortable to sit in for hours and hours.
A couple of other questions. Some of my favorite leather finish is the metallic look. How much more is the difference in the finishing phase than, let's say, a normal finish in a different flat color?
Okay, so how much more finishing? You know, it depends on the product. We have products that are natural leathers that would be considered aniline plus that are metallic, like a Notting Hill metallic from our line, which is gorgeous. And then there are other, you know, if you really like the kind of the flashy, brighter metallics that are more maybe consistent in color, or perhaps it's an emboss with a metallic tipping added to it. That metallic itself tends to have a little bit more pigment in the dye. So if we take an embossed hide and add a metallic tipping to it,
Oh, you cut up there.
Pinted because that metallic. Of course I did. So sorry, I'm so sorry to everyone about that.
These are part of the joys that we're all, you know, dealing with. So don't worry.
Exactly right. Yeah. So with the metallic, it is typically it's going to be you're going to have a little more pigment in order to get that solid colored, brighter, you know, metallic look. However, we do have, I'm not sure when I cut out, so we do have aniline plus products that are metallic as well. So it just depends on the product, really, the look you're going for.
Okay. And then we have another, this is kind of a good follow-up then. Are pigmented leathers those where the color can peel off after use or wear, seen in contemporary chairs?
Okay, a good leather should not peel off, right? So what you're seeing there is more typically going to be that die-cast product or that genuine leather product, perhaps. Right, so when you're seeing, yeah, the peeling off isn't necessarily because it's pigmented, because that would, you're dealing there with how is the finish adhering to the actual hide. And when you have a plywood of leather, you know, you could have issues there. But an actual leather hide, you know, you shouldn't be seeing that as a problem.
This is a question that is being asked in a few different places, but maybe just talk about, you know, one is basically asking what's the best way to be able to tell the quality of leather and sell that to clients. And then another is just kind of the wear and tear with animals, you know, cats, dogs, etc. And maybe a follow-up to that is, what is the most durable leather to spec for clients that do have pets?
Okay, really all great, great questions. I would say, as far as understanding what type of leather it is, you know, that you're looking at, I know that with our samples, for instance, you can see on the back what type of finish it is. I'm pretty sure it shows is also, you know, full grain leather. You can ask your sales rep for the leather company, they should know. You know, full grain is always going to be your best bet. If they say, you know, top grain, you're still okay. If they say bi-cast or PU or recycled or vegan or something like that, then start questioning more, or maybe steer clear of that and go to a different product. When it comes to maintenance, and which really sounds like the other bigger part of the question,
yeah,
it depends on the product, on how you maintain it, but it's really very simple. And I will say, there is a very short film on our website that is great about, it shows maintenance kind of the wear and tear with kids and pets and wine and people and all kinds of things on leather, on a natural leather. And it's very good. And every video, the longer video is also on our website, the moreandgiles.com, under films at the bottom, just for, I'm seeing a couple of other questions regarding that coming up in chat.
Yeah, we can include links to some of those videos as well.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah.
But one thing I will say is always ask your client, you know, what are they looking for? Do they want, when they're looking at leather, do they want a leather that will gain character and get better with age and kind of evolve with the family, change, then they want patina, and I would steer them toward aniline plus perhaps, or maybe even pure aniline. If they want something that's consistent in color, they're really nervous about, kids and pets and things like that, then maybe you go for a pigmented leather, or maybe you go for a semi-aniline product, because you can, wipe it off fairly easily, even though, the natural leathers would still be okay. It's really about where is their comfort level, and what are they imagining?
I'll give 3 last questions here because I think we're kind of up against it. The question about, and this kind of gets into maybe a 2-part question. One is sun or heat damage, and then the other is, does leather dry out and need to be conditioned?
Okay. The best thing you can do for leather is dust it. I'll be very honest. A lot of us kind of forget about that. Especially, don't forget the other portions of the chair that you don't sit on. When you're sitting in a leather chair or sofa, when you sit in it, guess what? You're dusting it, but you're not dusting the back, the areas around the welt, the sides. Make sure you dust it, because it will dry out just like our skin would dry out. Okay, and with dust. Okay. You don't have to condition leather. There are products. We do have products that we could recommend for that if you really want to. It's not necessary. As far as sun damage and heat and things like that, everything fades, okay? Everything. So if any product is sitting in front of direct sunlight, you're going to get some fading. And if that's what you mean by sun damage, then
that's where they're going.
Be prepared for that. Heat, if you put a blowtorch to it, sure, that could be a problem. But if it's in a hot room, no.
Last question. Are pebbled finishes and embossing?
Sometimes. So pebbled finishes can be achieved by, I talked about earlier, the milling of a hide. Here, I'm just gonna, they can, at that point, it's a natural, bigger, pebbled finish. Or you can certainly emboss a large pebble grain onto a hide. And it just depends on the product. If you're wanting it really consistent throughout, it's available really both ways.
Excellent. I think the last thing you want to just touch on the question again about the IDCEC numbers. I think what you want to just explain how that's going to work for folks to get their credit and what to do.
Yes. So all of those attending, if I'm assuming, you sent your email in to sign up for this. So Neil will be sending all of your emails to me, and you will receive a certificate from Warren Giles within a few days regarding completion of this course. At that time, you can then self-report to the IDCEC. And if you have trouble with that, you can reach me via the website, or I believe the certificate you'll receive from us, you can just respond with, hey, I have a question, and we'll help you get there.
And then the last question on that, they said, does this class have a number just in case we don't get the email?
Oh, you know what? I can get that to you, Neil, when we maybe follow up with some links. Does that work?
Yep, that sounds good. So we'll, just for the record then, so if you don't get an email in the next couple of days, please reach out to us, but you should. I think in terms of if you registered for this session, we have your information, and we'll be able to send you out not only the recording, but we'll send your email to the folks at Warren Giles, and they will communicate that certificate to you for you to self-register.
Mhm. Well, I hope that that answers many of your questions, and know that, you know, when you are choosing to specify leather, you are, or to use it, to buy it, you are making an excellent environmental decision. You are choosing to bring a new family member into your life or into the lives of your clients. Something we didn't touch on really in this session is the unique inherent connection that we have with leather, and some of the stories that I've heard over the years of how truly it becomes part of your story. It shows and exists part of the story, the piece that Tina and wear in, and potentially be handed down, you know, to family members. So it's a really great product, very versatile, very, very durable, really, truly easy to care for. And we thank you at Moore & Giles for your interest and for, you know, supporting the leather industry. It's fantastic. So
Great. Well, Beverly, thank you for participating in this and joining us. We appreciate everybody that logged in. Again, we'll send out not only some of the information and links that Beverly mentioned, we'll send the presentation, and then we'll also get your information to Beverly so you can get your certificates. If you do not get one in the next, I'd say by the end of the week, if you haven't heard from anybody or seen anything, just follow up with Universal, and we'll make sure that that gets addressed. But we should be in pretty good shape, I think, for most. So we appreciate everybody's time. We hope this has been informative. It certainly has been for us, and we look forward to doing this again, hopefully in person.
thank you so much. Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll take care.
Thank you. Okay, you
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.